welcome back to Make Away Life Coaching. My name is Sarah Abbott and I'm the life coach here. So today the How We Love book series is getting really good because in the last couple episodes we talked about what your love style was. So how you know how to love others and how to be loved. That's your love style. But today we're going to jump into the actual marriage patterns. So this is really profound, and we're going to start with the one that describes my marriage, the Vacillator-Avoider combo. But I just think this is really exciting because when we're in a relationship, you have this dance with this person, and this is how the Yurkoviches describe it. And it's like you're both having your steps, and the dance is going a certain way. It's probably not going the way you want it to. Oftentimes that's the case. But you just feel stuck. Like you just, no matter what happens, like the same arguments, the same, connections, the same problems, the same obstacles keep coming up and over and over and over. And the reason is because you're in a dance, but you're not like aware of why you're in the dance. And so you can't really get out of it until you understand both of your love styles and how that affects your marriage. So we're going to dive into that today, and I hope that you enjoy this stuff as much as I do. It's really, to me, life-transforming information. So let's go ahead and jump in. Today we're going to do the Vacillator-Avoider combo. This is AKA an episode about my marriage. My poor husband. Don't watch this one. Nick, just spare yourself. So it's pretty interesting because I'm the vacillator. You could probably tell. And my husband is an avoider. And just this whole chapter in the book is, perfect for Nick and I. So I grew up with a lot of turbulence in my family, and it felt like a roller coaster pretty much every day. That created a lot of anxiety inside of me, which then later just kind of made me angry. So I just had a lot of anger. I still struggle with anger, but it's a lot better than it used to be. And so when I started dating Nick, I was so drawn to his steadiness. To this day, I joke that he's my rock because he's so steady. And to me, that was such a relief after a lifetime of kind of like feeling like my entire life was like this crazy wild ride, my childhood. And now I got to have this, he was like a major steadying force in my life. Now, as for Nick, what he tells me is that he was super drawn to my passion and my excitement for life. And so, he felt very alive when we were together. And I think that is true. And he also really enjoyed how much I was like super into him. And my passion, when we were dating was like passion towards Nick, attention and all these, exciting things. But then what happened was we'd been together longer and longer. And so, of course, hormones settle down and feelings don't stay at 150% forever. And then life happened. So, like, we started our careers and Nick started hobbies and all these other things. And then, for instance, one of the things he did was he started doing triathlons. Well, I don't know if you know about triathlons, but it basically means that you are out of the house training all the time. Every spare second of your free time, this is what he was doing. And I cannot tell you, I didn't know I had abandonment issues back then, but holy moly, I was so hurt by his choices. And he was never around when we were home from work and we were young professionals. And boy, those feelings of abandonment made me feel really angry with him. So then when he was home, I was like, oh, what do you care? You don't even care about me. And he was like, what are you talking about? Because I went running and I was like, well, you don't understand. So I was getting really angry, and then that would make him feel defensive and kind of shut down, because that's what avoiders do. They're really good at just shutting down the feelings. Well, then that made me feel more abandoned because he like kind of disappeared, emotionally, which made me angrier, and then he would shut down more. Blah. So that was really intense. And then the kids came along and we were arguing more. I was in protest all the time. Like, I just wanted more time together, and especially, like, after a long day at home with the kids, I wanted him to come home and talk to me and, you know, give me attention and make me feel special, because I'm a vacillator. Those things are important. And he was tired after a long day, and he got, you know, kind of tired of I was just so, like, irritated and disappointed with him a lot over my feelings of abandonment. And then he would just, so he kind of came home and wouldn't really open up, and then I felt more abandoned. But again, we didn't know any of this. This became our dance, and we were stuck. Then we would eventually have this huge explosion of an argument, usually caused by me. But his role in it was that he was, at this point, completely shut down in our marriage almost all the time. So maybe the vacillator starts the fight, but it's not necessarily always the vacillator's fault, because the other person has behaviors that are equally as destructive. Being shut down all the time is not healthy for a marriage. But it's the vacillator who's going to actually start the fight, because we don't mind fighting. That's just the basic facts. In fact, fighting can be very connecting. That's the secret of the vacillator. That's how we feel. Other people don't feel that way, but we do. So anyway, eventually I started therapy, and then I realized that we needed couples therapy. So we spent all of our money on therapy. That is true. And anyway, so we went for it. We found a great couples therapist by the grace of God. We didn't do any research. She was just great. She was a Christian counselor. And she was actually Gottman trained, only level 1, but I recommend Gottman trained therapists very highly. I think that's, to me, the gold standard of couples therapy. I didn't know that at the time. I learned that later in therapy school. Gottman therapy is great. Even just level 1 is, like, really fantastic. And so we went to couples therapy, and it was so hard. Like, couples therapy is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. But we stuck with it, and we learned some things. And one of the major things that she helped us with was understanding the information from How We Love, and how our love styles were causing this dance that we felt stuck in. And then giving us some tools on how to change the dance. So now, gosh, I don't know, 10 years later, we still have things that come up, but most of the time, if I sense him, like, let's say he's stressed about something at work. Well, he never comes home and says, I'm stressed at work, because he's an avoider. He comes home and says, nothing. Because he's an avoider, so he's a little bit shut down. And I notice my feelings are like, why is he not talking to me? Why is he emotionally distant? And then I can calm myself, which is the work of the vacillator, and eventually come to him and be like, you seem really quiet. Is everything okay? Which is huge, because before it would have been like me acting out over him being shut down for a week. But instead, right in the beginning, I can be like, you seem really quiet. Is everything okay? And then he'll be like, usually, maybe he knows, maybe he doesn't know, but he'll think about it and be like, you know what? You're right. I am quiet. I'm, like, really stressed about work. And then we can talk about it. That's all the vacillator wants, like, talk, connection. So that's a big improvement. And then one of the major things that Nick had to work on, which is the avoider work, is he works really, really hard on not shutting down as much. So especially with conflict, if you're married to a vacillator, you're gonna have conflict. Sorry, there's no way around it. You gotta wrap your mind around that one. And so I'm pretty quick to just pop off about things, like, blah, you know, not like a huge, to me that's like nothing, honestly. It's just like talking. And his work has been, like what the health therapist said, that's what his work was to kind of like realize that, you know, doesn't mean I'm even like angry with him. I'm just irritated, for instance, because we have a shoe basket and he never puts his shoes in the basket. He puts them right next to the basket. This makes me insane. And I'll be like, why are your shoes never in the basket? But he has now learned that my popping off like that, okay, exactly, this just happened this weekend with the shoe thing. It happens every weekend pretty much. But it's not like this huge, he doesn't have to shut down over me popping off about his shoes near the basket. Not in the basket. And so he's been able to control his responses more and not shut down because I popped off. Usually he ignores me, to be honest with you, which kind of works for the fact I can just pop off and it just goes and it's fine. And then one of the things I need to work on, and I say need because it's present tense, this is really hard for me, but The vacillator in a marriage really needs to work on a soft startup, it's called. That's actually from Gottman. But instead of coming at them like a blaze of fire, it's like to come at them and be a little bit more gentle and be like, can we talk about something I have some feelings about? Because it's like, you know, our anger and frustration can be very overwhelming for people. And I'm not always good at that. Like if I'm feeling emotional, which is most of the time, it's very hard for me to control how I start a conversation. But that's the work. We're still working on it. But I will tell you, there is so much hope in this book because it has changed our dynamic and our dance so much. And I'm so grateful for the work. And I'm so grateful we did it. And that we know now what to work on. And usually when things are falling apart, we can kind of tell what's going on. So that's huge. Okay, let's jump into this Vacillator-Avoider combo. I want to start with a quote from the book, the amazing book you should be reading. They call this the core pattern of the vacillator and the avoider. The avoider and the vacillator handle their childhood hurts in opposite ways. The avoider gives up the desire for connection and becomes self-sufficient, but vacillators make connection their primary goal. They believe something good, something that will make life wonderful, is just around the corner. After the avoider has been married to the vacillator for a while, the vacillator pursues the independent spouse in an effort to get his or her attention. Avoiders then feel overwhelmed and anxious, so they disengage and retreat. This retreat agitates the vacillators, and their anger intensifies as they feel rebuffed and abandoned. Their displays of anger and disappointment make avoiders retreat further. I mean, I just told you this wasn't what Nick and I were doing, like to a T. Over time, the chase scene picks up speed as well as intensity and leads this couple on a perilous roller coaster journey. That's the irony. I'm a vacillator. I married Nick, honestly, because of his steadiness. But that's what's crazy about marriage. The thing you loved about them oftentimes, a lot of times, ends up being the thing you're going to fight about. That was totally true. So here we end up on a roller coaster journey with a lot of ups and downs, which is the whole thing I was trying to avoid, right? Why? Why did we do that? We did that because I was a vacillator and roller coaster is what I know. And when you haven't done the work in your own life, you're going to a lot of times recreate what you know from childhood, which is why this book has so much freedom in it, because it's when you're aware of what's going on and why you're doing things, that is when you have the power to change them. Okay, enough about me. So let's just briefly go over, you got to read the chapter. If you are a vacillator or avoider and you think you're married to the other one, read the chapter. It's so powerful. But basically, the avoider, to sum up what the Yurkoviches tell us, is like the avoider goes through life in a mid-range existence. I call it the Goldilocks effect. Not too hot, not too cold. Right in the middle. Right where the rocks are, right? Right in the middle. And so when they meet the vacillator, or when they're married to the vacillator is really good at intensity and connection, and that makes the avoider really feel alive. So that's kind of like the reason that those two get together. Okay, what does the book tell us about why the vacillator likes the avoider? Well, in the beginning at least, the vacillator is super drawn to how steady this mid-range existence of the avoider is. Very soothing and calming because it's not up and down, it's in the middle. And so, you know, the vacillator grew up in a home with no consistency or steadiness, so they're very drawn to this, and it allows them to feel like their anxiety goes down because they're not always having to wait for the next wild ride to start. It's always like this with them, and that in the beginning is like super attractive. So as things go along, the vacillator senses, they're so attuned to other people. They sense that the connection is starting to fade. And again, like I told you from my story, this could be for something as simple as the spouse getting a hobby and not being with them 24/7. Whatever the reason, the vacillator starts to have that anxiety return because this connection is fading. What is going on? What is going on? And the anxiety almost always manifests outwardly in anger. That's what the vacillator does. Like I said, we're a bunch of tough guys. We think we're a bunch of tough guys. And so then the anger and resentment starts to build, which makes the avoider shut down. That's what avoiders are prone to do when they feel their back is against the wall. And then that makes the vacillator even angrier because the abandonment is now triggered even more, because when the person comes home from their job or their hobby, they're even more shut down. And this is the crazy dance of the vacillator-avoider. Here's the thing about the vacillators. If you're a vacillator, you really need to know this. One of the major areas of our work is that we tend to see people as all good or all bad. This is not true. That is not true for almost anyone. I mean, maybe even Hitler had some good things that we don't know about, okay? So the vacillator now is with this spouse who we used to think was all good. Now they're starting to hurt us, even if it's accidental, it hurts. So that we very quickly move them into the all bad column, which is going to cause even more conflict and more protests. The vacillator is going to be protesting how you're all bad. And then worst case scenario, the vacillator begins to lose hope that they can get this person back. And they become, again, this is very worst case. Eventually they'll stop protesting and just detach from the relationship, which is really, really bad because they're married to an avoider. An avoider is not inclined to try to repair the detachment. They know detachment really well. So then that's kind of where the marriage might settle, is with two people who are turned away from each other, totally detached. Okay, that is a brief summary of the chapter about the Vacillator-Avoider marriage. I highly recommend you get the book, read the chapter. I'm not making any money on the book. I just think everyone should read this book. It will change your life and it will change your marriage. So why wouldn't you? If you resonated with what we talked about today, then read the chapter. But what they recommend is that they do have a workbook with lots of activities. And the activities are for Vacillator-Avoider combos. So they're very specific. They don't waste your time. And they will move you forward. And then my last piece of advice is to pray for your marriage. Because all of these things are deep emotional work. And I am a firm believer, based on my faith and based on my own personal experience as a wife and mother, that there's only so much we can do on our own with these emotional woundings and these patterns. I really believe that things start to change when you start praying. And I know that God will help you. So that would be if I were you, that would be my first step, is ask God to help you. And then secondly, do the work. You know, some Christians rely on God to do everything, and that's not what he wants. He wants you to be an active participant in your life and your marriage and to fight for it. So I hope that you will. So that's the end of this information. I hope you join us next week. We're going to be talking about the vacillator pleaser marriage, which is super interesting. See you then. Bye-bye.